Unfortunately, less than 2 weeks ago, I had to say goodbye to one of the members of my family, my mother's sister, my 92-year-old aunt. And when I was younger, both my parents had to work a fair amount. So, my Aunt Ruth was kind of a second mother to me. So, in today's video, I want to share with you the things I learned visiting with her for the last time, having those last conversations, because if you haven't had those conversations, or they're in our all of our futures, and at some point, it's gonna be our turn to say goodbye, and as a financial advisor for over 20 years, I found it really powerful to go through that experience with her. Now, my Aunt Ruth lived a very full life. She had a great life. Unfortunately, the last 2 years, 2.5 years was hard for her. But the first thing is my Aunt Ruth had a lot of adventures in life. Now, again, she was 92 years old when she passed. She was a secretary at one of the major newspapers in the town that I grew up with. Uh, at and that was a big job for a woman back then. She did not have any of her own children, so her nieces and nephews were kind of her kids. And so the first thing I learned from her was she took a lot of adventures when she was younger. And if she couldn't find somebody to travel with her, she would travel solo. And I think many of you that have watched some of my videos in the past know that I like to travel solo. I love traveling with my family and my wife as well. um, but if nobody can go with me, I'm still gonna go, and I'm gonna go solo. So my aunt did that. She went all over the world. She went to communist Russia in the late '70s, when the Cold War was at its height. And so she did a lot of adventures. She did her own research back before the internet. And people would say, "Hey, this country is dangerous," or "That country is dangerous," and sometimes they are. But what I learned from my Aunt Ruth was to do my own research and to have these adventures and to not wait until I was retired to do these things. So she retired after 30 years in her job, more than 30 years, when she was 65 years old. And she had already crossed a ton of things off of her bucket list. And I talk a lot about a book called Die with Zero, written by this author, Bill Perkins. And what I like about Bill's work, and in fact, I was thinking about writing a very similar book, but frankly, I can't do as good of a job as Mr. Perkins did. So my book will be something different. But Bill Perkins talks about not necessarily having a bucket list of things that you want to do before you retire, but he calls them life buckets. Things that you want to do that are easier to do at different ages in your life. And I think my Aunt Ruth did a great job of doing that, doing some international travel. She was really an adventurous woman at a time when that was very unusual to do. So that was one of the things. The other thing is just the you're gonna laugh, but this is the God's truth. Um, Many of the stocks that my Aunt Ruth owned, she owned from the 1960s and held on to her. She was a believer in the Warren Buffett strategy before Warren Buffett even was famous and had articulated it. So some of the people that she worked with at this major newspaper were, decent investors in their personal accounts. And she was up in the executive office, so she was a secretary, but she knew what her friends in the office were buying. She'd do her own research, and then she would buy stock in these companies. And her favorite holding period was forever, which is my favorite holding period too. But unfortunately, the world has a way of changing. But she invested wisely and stayed with these companies through thick and thin. And um, I've obviously I enjoy investments, so this is something I've been talking to her about since I was 16 years old. And she would say, just stay the course, find great companies, stick with them. They're going to go through their ups and downs. And to be able to do that in her case for over a half of a century was just an amazing thing. The other thing, as a kid, instead of finding me a $5 toy for my birthday, or $10 for Christmas or whatever it was. Um, my Aunt Ruth would buy stock in a utility company in the Southeast. I won't mention names. That's not what this video is about. It's not what my channel's about. But instead of buying little gifts that I'd quit playing within a day or two, she would buy a couple shares of stock or a fractional share of stock. And over the years, that added up and became a meaningful position. And my entire life, she kept her money in that one stock, even though, when interest rates go up, utility companies tend to get hurt because it's a capital intensive business. They have to borrow money. Uh, but, and so it probably, I don't know, I wasn't following it that closely in the late 70s, the early 80s when interest rates just skyrocketed up and um, uh, Ted Chairman Volcker dramatically raised interest rates. I'm sure that stock got hit, but just thinking about the long game and somebody that was able to live to 92, um, played the long game. Like I said, there's stock in my name that's older and not older than I am, but almost as old as I am. So some of those shares are going to have a holding period of over 50 years. Okay. The other thing I learned from my Aunt Ruth is she was very good about maintaining her health. For her, she was a big believer in vitamins. I know that's controversial. I can share with you, she taught my mother into taking a bunch of vitamins as well. And my mom is still pretty healthy. My mother's the young sister in that family, so she's 90 years old. Uh, but, taking care of her health, both her physical health, so the vitamins, she would make a lot of her own foods. This video is not sponsored by Vitamix, but many people know what a Vitamix is. I finally invested in one of those myself, just so I can make high quality food myself from the raw ingredients without all the preservatives. I wish I had done that 20 years earlier. This thing's going to last past my lifetime, which is a great thing, but I could have had it 20 years earlier because it's going to last a long, long time. But not just her physical health, but also her mental health. You may have heard me talk in previous videos about how I like to listen to motivational records. Back in the day when I was a little kid, um, we didn't have, Spotify, we didn't have the internet, obviously, but we did have our local library and they had vinyl records of, I think it's Brian Tracy and Zig Ziglar, uh, and the Nightingale Corporation. That was the OG in the space of motivational videos. And so I used to go to the library and I'd listen to those at night to get me in the right mental mindset. When I visited my aunt in the hospital for the last time, I was there for 4 days. Each time I went into the hospital, she was listening to the radio, and you know what she was listening to? She was listening to motivational things, just, to get her through the day and for her to be able to get the most out of the last few days that she had. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you found this video helpful, something that's worth thinking about is, when do you decide to retire? When do we retire? And that's why I made this video up here. Why waiting to 65 to retire? Uh, might be a big mistake. And I want to dedicate this video to my Aunt Ruth. Thank you, Aunt Ruth, for always caring and loving for me. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you the next one. Bye bye.